Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Hands on Politics, where a couple of brothers from the Bronx get together on a weekly basis to discuss the issues of the day. We have established the Bronx Institute, which exposes the swamp and media lies, and we are trying to make politics understandable for those who want to understand politics. As you notice, my brother Rich is not here today. He's driving back from Virginia Beach up to New York, and so we have a special guest, and this is my son, Cameron. He's a political mover and shaker in Washington, D.C. So, Cameron, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. Believe this is my second time on, right?
It is. This is the first time we're seeing your face, though.
Yeah. I'm a repeat guest.
That's right.
But yeah, happy to be on. Happy to talk some politics while Uncle Richie's out. And yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you. Now, we saw each other just whatever it was a week or two ago at the 4th annual Ann P. Hand Shamrock Run. And I wanted to show a picture of this and kind of introduce some of our family. So here we go. That's me right there. Let's see. That is your Uncle Richie, my brother.
Mm-hmm.
Who else do we have? Your mother. Your mother's there. Your mother, Sherry Lynn Hand. And that is Richie's wife, Justine. And that is our producer / marketing director for HOP, your Aunt Chris. And there is your Aunt Tricia, who actually, during the Shamrock Run, she came in first place in the 13, or what was it? The 8K. So she's
out of our family, correct? Not
yes, out of our family, and that's all that really matters.
Yeah.
Yes, if she wanted to come in first, she could, but she wants to kind of hang around the family a little bit. Mm-hmm. Who else do we have? Oh, we have her husband, Kenny Croak there. And who is that? We have Allison, and we have Alex Eckert, the Eckerts there. And then your beautiful wife there, Caitlin. And there is you right there behind me. Mm-hmm. And last but not least, there is Goose down there at the bottom.
It's the dog.
Oh, wait, we're missing one person, and that is your cousin, my nephew, Joseph. So just wanted everybody to get to know the family a little bit. There's a lot more people in the family, and a lot of times, a lot of years, those people make it down to the Shamrock Run, to the Ann P. Hand Shamrock Run, but they weren't able to make it this year, but hopefully in the future. And I'll give a special shout out to Kelsey, your sister, my daughter, who can't be here today, but hopefully someday she'll be on the show again, just like you, because Kelsey's been on the show before.
Really?
All right. Yeah, she's been on the show. So before we get started with politics, I first want to do our disclaimer here, because I introduced a bunch of people from our family, but the truth is, the truth is, maybe not everybody agrees with our politics, and so I don't want anybody getting fired because they're associated with Hands on Politics. So the disclaimer is, just because someone is seen hanging out with Rich and Ken, this does not necessarily mean they agree with our political beliefs, but of course they should. So that's the disclaimer there. And
very important.
What is next? Oh, yes. You pride yourself on being an expert and very knowledgeable in sports and, what's going on in the world of sports. And so I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on the Hawks this year. We're pretty big Hawks fans, and personally, this is maybe my favorite year watching the Hawks. I just think they're playing, they're just playing really well. They give 110% each night, and so I'm enjoying it. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on the Hawks. You think they have any chance at, going a little bit into the playoffs? Who do you think's going to win the NBA championship this year? Just kind of, I want to get your opinion on some of those things.
A quick debrief. Yeah. Cause you had mentioned, like you just did, that it was your favorite year, that you can remember. And that, like, I don't, something that always really impresses me about, professional sports commentators and, I guess commentators in general, is their ability to like draw on the well of knowledge. Like, obviously, that's famous for, political commentators. But for sports too, people are like, oh man, I remember, 1997 and the Celtics this year, that year, whatever. But yeah, it's hard for me to remember a season I've enjoyed more than this one. The run, I guess the only other time that comes to mind, two times, was the run for the Hawks, where they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. And if you remember, they did a similar thing that year where they kind of went on a streak of winning towards the end of the season, like they've done now. I just read Hawks are 17-2 in their last 19 games. So anyway, that Trey Young year where they beat the Knicks and the Sixers, and lost to the Bucks in the playoffs, that was really good. And then also when they did make it to the Eastern Conference one other time, that like Kyle Korver, Al Horford team, that was a
Yes.
fun year. Um, but yeah, so I guess it'll all depend on what they do in the playoffs to determine, how fondly we look back on the season. But yeah, like we've talked about, it's been an awesome season. And the most exciting thing is I think they do have an opportunity to build up this year, because they have the New Orleans Pelicans first round pick. They have their own first round pick. Some of their guys are still young. Jalen Johnson's still relatively young. Dyson Daniel's still young. So anyway, the future is looking bright. But yeah, my guess is they probably, if they win, it's just it's going to be tough because they're going to have to play the Cavaliers or Knicks in the first round. If they win a playoff round, or then I would consider it all a success. But they have the potential, I think, to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals and probably not much farther. But yeah, I think the consensus for everybody is the Celtics and the Thunder in the finals this year. So that's probably what's going to happen.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
Now let me say this. When I say this is, the year I've enjoyed this year more than any other year,
Hmm.
part of it is because they are playing their tails off. I think it was Akagwu who was interviewed after the game, and he said, "We have been playing our butts off since the All-Star break." And that's what I see night in and night out. They are running around playing defense like I've never seen
Hmm.
the Hawks play defense before.
Switching everything. Yeah.
Switching, the Hawks, one of the frustrating things for me has always been how the other team seems to like break records hitting three-pointers every time they play the Hawks. And I think part of that might have something to do with effort because they're not rushing to get to the guy who's open in the corner to try to, put pressure on him. But I want to give you an opportunity to maybe dispel some of the criticisms of NBA basketball. Because over the years, I hear about NBA basketball, they don't play any defense. And I got to say, I've never seen, I don't agree with that, that characterization of the NBA. I do think they play very good defense. But I'll tell you what, I've never seen the Hawks play better defense than they're playing now. And so I'm just going to ask you, what do you think about that criticism of the NBA? Do you think it
Hmm.
has any validity that they don't play defense?
Yeah, and when I think of, I don't even know if this is 100% fair to this person, but when I think of that criticism, I think of Aunt Trisha for some reason.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if she's ever, but that just seems as though something she would say, or Joe, or
Yo, yeah,
whomever.
it's definitely a Joe thing for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's a criticism of people who aren't watching a lot of games, because I do think it can vary, the defensive intensity and whatnot can vary from game to game, and also vary depending on what team you're watching and depending on what they're playing for. Like if you're gonna watch, the Wizards right now and play whomever, like that's not going to be the highest, defensive intensity game because the game doesn't, mean much or whatever. Um, but yeah, there's no doubt if you're watching a significant amount of games, you're going to see, a lot of intensity. It's a fast paced, game. So yeah, I guess I would just say people who say that just probably don't watch enough. And maybe they see some clips, which you can always, pull some clips here and there. Somebody's going to get blown by, whatever. And, there are players, that don't, like, singular players that don't really try on defense. But I think, as a general rule, like the game to game intensity of these games, um, is really up, and like we've talked about too, the skill level is just through the roof right now. It's just like it's unbelievable. Like every you can't. This is something I've said to you. I've said to Joe. It's like you can't have a Tristan Thompson on your team anymore. You can't have a Tabo Cephalosha, if you remember Dad on the Hawks. Like you can't have those guys who can't
I don't
score,
remember
can't shoot.
Cephalosha. Who was
Cephalosha,
he?
he was super long arms, foreign guy, super long arms on the Hawks. He could hit a three, but he was just one of these classic, wing defenders who couldn't score, and it doesn't fly anymore because it's just such a the skill level is so high. So that's why I would say to those who kind of make that complaint. It's like you need a bigger sample size probably to be able to make that statement. But because on a whole, again, you could see some clips. You might see some players not trying, but as a whole, the intensity is up for sure.
Yeah. All right.
Mhm.
Well, listen, let's move on to some politics because that's what
We
we're
can
here to
start
talk.
a hands-on sports podcast,
That was yeah.
a hands-on
That's
sports
right.
segment.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about the Iran war. We're going to talk about birthright citizenship, which was they just had a what do you call a hearing at
Hearing.
the Supreme Court on that yesterday. We're going to talk a little bit about the Save Act, maybe a little bit about Pam Bondi getting fired, and maybe Kristi Noem a little bit. And then, if we have time, we'll talk about a couple court cases that are out there that I just picked. There's so many things, so many court cases that are out there because I think President Trump is really pushing a lot of things like birthright citizenship or eliminating it, that he's really forcing people to take them to court to fight against it. So there's a lot of interesting things going on. And so I just picked out a couple of issues, a couple of court cases that maybe we'll get a chance to talk about. So let's see. First thing I want to talk about is the Iran war. And let me just start it out with kind of what the objectives were initially. And I know, Cam, that you had some concerns. I had some concerns also about going to war with Iran, but I think yours are maybe more substantial. And so let me open it up and then I'm going to pass it back to you so that you can kind of tell me what your feelings are about the war. First of all, uh, Trump basically said, we're going there to eliminate an imminent threat, whatever imminent means. We're going to degrade Iran's military capabilities, which means we're going to destroy Iran's ballistic missile stockpiles, their production facilities. We're going to neutralize Iran's navy and their strategic forces. We're going to reduce Tehran's ability to support proxy groups like Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis. Most importantly, one thing that Trump repeats all the time is he wants to prevent a nuclear war, or I'm sorry, he wants to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, which in turn, in his mind, would prevent a nuclear war, I'm sure. And this wasn't necessarily a direct objective, but he wants to facilitate internal change. He wants to, regime change. Again, not sure that he came out and really said that too explicitly, but maybe he did. So I want to kind of pass it back to you and say, because I know you had concerns and we can talk about that. So what are some of your biggest concerns about the Iran war?
Mhm. Yeah, I like internal change is a good rebranding of regime change or like um yeah, I didn't it's tough because like I didn't write anything down, and it's almost like where do you begin? Because it's like when you say that, a million things come flooding, and it makes me be, it makes me think like I want to say like, oh, like the biggest thing is this, the biggest thing is that, but it's like they're all. It's almost hard to kind of put one ahead of the other, right? I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is that, and this is something that is a Trump problem, and that he does like, and that he doesn't care about is that this, in my opinion, absolutely, and I've said this to you before, eliminates Republicans are not winning in the midterms. Like that is not happening. And 100% not win, or I won't say 100%, but it, I this really, really degrades their ability to win the next presidential election because it's not. And maybe you could show me a poll. Yeah, I've seen polls like that say it's not popular. I've seen you post a poll once, at least. I'm sure you could find a poll that says it is popular, whatever. But I think anybody that's living in the real world, talking to people, anything is like, this is extremely unpopular. It's very, very, very obviously goes against what he campaigned on, and yeah, I mean, it's just extremely unpopular, and it's going to kill the Republicans in the primary or primary, no,
in the
midterms. Yeah,
midterms. Yeah,
in the midterms. Good luck to JD Vance next year, or Marco Rubio, not next year, next presidential cycle. Like, they are not winning with this on their resume unless they can come out completely against it, which they can't. So to me, that is one of the biggest issues. The other biggest issue is obviously, why, like you laid out the objectives, I think, much better than anybody in the administration has. From what I've seen, it's very jumbled. I mean, Trump has come out and, called for regime change and tweets and things, or, whatever, True Social, whatever.
yeah,
But then he'll say, "Oh, we never called for it." There's like the nuclear weapon angle that you brought up, which I think most people are kind of over, because you can just see the clips and clips and clips of whether it be Benjamin Netanyahu or whoever claiming they're so close to a nuclear weapon. We had whatever happened a couple months ago where we destroyed their bunkers, and we're led to believe that that destroyed their nuclear capacity. So I don't think anybody believes that about the nuclear weapons thing. And so it's like, what's the reason here? I would assume it's just because Trump feels so confident. He's so confident. I don't know if confident's the right word, but I mean, some of you could say maybe arrogant. I don't, yeah, that sounds harsh, obviously, but he's like, hey, like, Iran, like, we don't like them and they don't respect me and they don't respect America. And he's so caught up in his own thing and he thinks everybody's going to follow his lead in America. And he gets us into this coming off the Venezuela thing. He probably thinks it's going to be easier. But anyway, just to wrap up that reason, it's like, why are we doing this? It's costing billions of dollars. I think like 15 Americans have died. And so again, those are just two of the things right off the top of the head. It's like, why the money, the death, and also then there's a million other things. And then it also just completely, in my opinion, eliminates any possibility of Republicans winning anything in the next like 4 years.
yeah. Well, one of the things that you talked about is kind of the message, right? Like what we
The
have on the
messaging's
screen.
so bad.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems with Trump is, you know, sometimes the way he is, sometimes, sometimes the way he communicates is effective. But when it comes to war, I think you have to be much more humble. You have to have a tight message. And Trump just has a problem. He has a stream of consciousness. Whatever comes into his mind just comes out. And he says whatever he's thinking, and there are times, and I think one of them is during a war, where you have to control the messaging. And because it's not, I think you said that he came out of Venezuela. I think he came out pretty cocky and was like basically thinking this is so easy. Venezuela is not Iran. Iran has 93 million people, and probably a lot of them are willing to go to death or willing to die to fight against the great Satan. So I am concerned about the message. I'm a little bit concerned about how kind of cavalierly Trump is treating the war.
Yeah,
Uh,
and could I make a
yeah,
point
go
on
ahead.
that real quick? Like, and I think it must be getting worse with his age because yeah, it's like the mess. Like stream of conscious. Like for example, like I said, he interrupted Survivor last night for the second time this year to give like a prepared speech. And I'm like, okay, like, I'm kind of forced to watch this because I want to see what happens on Survivor. And I'm like, what? Like like, I'm like, what is he talking about? Like every single time I hear him talk, like even in these prepared remarks, it's just like he's just making no sense, and he's doing the whole thing to your point. I don't know if you use the word callous nature or whatever, or you need to be more like
Cavalier.
he's just like, oh, we've like in our military, we've killed like 10 million people and we've destroyed all their targets and nobody's seen anything like and it's like, okay, like we've heard it 100 times from him and Pete Hegseth. That's like we understand that like yes, if we wanted to, we can do a pretty good job against Iran's military. But it's like, why is he coming on here with a prepared speech just to tell us again, like, hey, gas prices are high, but like they have we don't need the Strait of Hormuz and we've destroyed all their stuff, but gas is at $5 a gallon, whatever. It's like
Yeah.
anyway, it's kind of hard for me to kind of put together a coherent thought on that because it's frustrating listening to him talk about this war and then
No,
like,
I understand.
yeah.
Let me, because you talked to me about this when we first started bombing Iran, and I know that you feel that I'm a bit hypocritical. I think you think that just because I'm against going to war, because that is one of the things I wanted to when Trump was running against Kamala Harris, and prior to that, I thought he was going to be running against Joe Biden. I was very critical of Joe Biden and what we were doing in Ukraine. And I liked the fact that Trump was talking about not going into any unnecessary wars and things like that. And I think that you felt that I would just agree with Trump. Oh, he goes to war. Oh no, we need to go to war. Um, so I think you were, you thought I was going to, and maybe you still think that I've been hypocritical. I don't know, but what I've said previously on this show is that if Trump was to ask me, should I go to war with Iran, I would have said no, because when we dropped those bunker busting bombs, I thought that was the proper way to do it, because I was younger, so I don't want to say I grew up with the United States going to war in Afghanistan and Iraq, but I was younger. And so I've seen it over the years where we go to war with Afghanistan, go to war with Iraq, and all of a sudden you realize we're there for 10 years, 20 years. And the only thing that's happened is we've spent a lot of money, a lot of Americans have died, and the people in those countries aren't any better off. And the fact of the matter is that many people in those countries don't want what we have. They don't want Western democracy. And so, what I said after Afghanistan and Iraq and the second Iraq war was that what we need to do is, if we have any country that's causing any problems, I would support just bombing them to smithereens, not the people necessarily, but taking out their capabilities, taking out their nuclear capabilities, taking out their ballistic capabilities, and then just leaving. Just okay, what we're done. They can't bother us for a long time. And I thought that that's what Trump had learned. And I thought that's what Trump did when we bombed the Iranian nuclear facility. So I was very happy with that. But then he goes in there, this time. And so I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't think that's a good idea. Now, having said that, I do think that we don't have, I do think that Trump was reluctant to do what he's doing now, but I think he got some additional information that maybe indicates that Iran was more of a threat, definitely to Israel, but possibly to the United States. And so I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I'm not, and I just hope and I pray that this operation goes smoothly, and that we do get out before we have another quagmire like we had in Afghanistan, like we had in Iraq. And I just hope and pray that a lot of people don't die, and that this ends up being a good thing. But then recently I saw where we're bringing in you probably know the number better than I think 50,000 ground troops were bringing them at least over on ships, and I don't like the sound of that. We really don't need to do that. And so I'm giving Trump trust. I'm trusting him, but I am concerned, and I don't like it. Just seems like we are inching toward getting involved more deeply than we should, and I'm concerned about that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I just don't, yeah, I see. I think that's because, yeah, coming off, the initial, bombings, I'm like, oh, what's dad think of this? I'm sure he'll be, all gung ho about it. And like you're obviously not, happy about it, but I just think you, I just think like I just wonder if there is a leap from like, oh, you're kind of like, ah, what hopefully we'll see what happens to like the leap that I've, taken of like this is a complete disaster. It's I mean, just like you can watch video on video of him. Oh, if Kamala Harris gets elected, we're gonna have a war with Iran. Like it just hypocritical statement after hypocritical statement. And it's just like and then I'm trying to listen to be like, okay, like let's see if he can make you feel better about this. And it's just, oh, we have complete air superiority and whatever. Like, I just he has absolutely no like I can't give like I think on the Venezuela thing and on the Iran initial bombing where they took out the bunkers, I gave him the benefit of the doubt there, where I'm like, okay, like seems like it worked out, but this is just too far. It's just like this is something nobody wanted, and like there doesn't seem to be good reason for it. And again, I do think it can't be overstated how this is just going to absolutely eliminate Republicans. This is like you're still going to vote for Donald Trump. The Lindsey Graham's. I don't know why he came to mind. Those older Republican Lindsey Graham. Not to lump you in with him, but you,
Please don't.
Uncle Richie, you guys are voting for him. It's like that's you don't got to worry about those people. You have to worry about
Well, hold on.
the
I
people.
need to ask you a
Yeah.
question because I want you to clarify this. When you say it's a disaster, are you saying the war and how it's being executed is a disaster, or are you mainly talking about this is a disaster for the Republican Party when it comes to the midterms and maybe the, JD Vance, like you mentioned earlier, it's a disaster politically in the United States?
Yeah, like, I'm sure, I know that some people claim that it's going poorly. I'm sure and I know some people claim it, it's the best military operation ever. It's probably somewhere in between those 2 things. I would be surprised if it's going poorly, but I'm no, military expert. I mean, I do know from the sense of, gas being high and public sentiment, it's a disaster, and that's more kind of what um you know, kind of what I mean.
Okay.
So yeah, and yeah, and that ties into just again, like this loses the people who watch Joe Rogan and are like, oh, this is the Trump, he's gonna end war. Like, okay, this loses like those are the people I think who want it for him. It's and so anyway,
Well, let me
I
ask you
would say
another
that's a
question.
disaster. But go ahead.
Let me, okay. Now, if, and this is a big if this war eliminates their nuclear capability, if it eliminates their ballistic missiles and all their drones, and it eliminates their ability, at least in the foreseeable future, to manufacture new ones, if it destroys the funding for Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, if it replaces an oppressive Islamic regime and a Western type constitutional republic uh, is installed, if Iranian citizens get more freedom than what they've had before, if the Strait of Hormuz is open and secure, and let's say that if that happened, would it be as much of a disaster as you believe it is right now or is going to be? And do you think there's any possibility of this being, you know, as clean as what I just said? And then would it be a problem for Republicans?
Mhm. Yeah, I don't think that, and I won't go through every point you made, but I kind of don't. expect any of those things to happen, like, and I know you don't expect, I'm sure you don't expect Iran to all of a sudden have, friendly US, a government that's friendly to the United States and Israel, at least not for the long term. Like, so anyway, I don't really, oh, if it destroyed all their capabilities, whatever, it's like, okay, buys us, 5 more years maybe. But again, I don't really buy the argument that we're threatened in here in America by a Iranian, ballistic missile. So yeah, I don't, one, I don't expect those things to happen. Two, if they did happen, um, two, if they did happen, I mean, yeah, I guess it would help. You'd have something to point to, like, look, we have a democracy in Iran now. It's like, okay, but I still don't think it's going to help Republicans get elected, because I think a lot of people that voted for Trump feel betrayed by this. And I know a number of, people, older people, younger people who are like, and you've referenced some who are now like, I feel betrayed, because I, feel that way too. Because again, if you were to ask me before the election, that would be the number one thing I would have said: foreign policy, like, no new wars. And now he's jumped us into multiple. And so anyway, so even if all those things happen, I think the damage has been done in terms of the Republican Party and the people who voted Republican feeling betrayed by Trump. And then there's also the layer, as I look at like Netanyahu over there, is I do think, there's this big, Israel divide in the Republican Party. And this, no matter what happens, is going to exacerbate it, because there are the optics that Israel dragged us into this war, whether true or not. That's still also a damaging thing for people who voted Republican, and very divisive. So, to answer your question, I don't expect any, if all, or some, or I don't expect those things to happen. But I do think even if they did, that would only mitigate, the political damage a little bit. But people are going to feel betrayed, and then this whole Israel thing. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, and on my little card here, I do have arrows up and arrows down. I think it's realistic to say we're going to eliminate their nuclear capabilities, their ballistic missiles, their drones, destroy funding for Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis for a while. Um, but
But it's like, how do we even know? It's like, no, the average like, you tell me, oh, if Trump comes out, we destroyed their nuclear capabilities. I'm like, he's already told us that. Like, I'm not like, it doesn't mean none of that means anything to me, because I don't really believe what anybody says about it.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
but the tough part, the difficult part would be replacing the Islamic regime, putting a Western type constitutional republic, and then freedom for Iranian people. Those are very difficult, and those don't happen in a week or two or a month or two.
Mhm.
So, I can't. I wish I could argue with you that that this won't have much of an impact. Like, to your point, when you put me together with Lindsey Graham, I don't think I'm with
Yeah, that
Lindsey
was a
doing.
bad choice.
But yeah, but I understand your point. Like, for me, when I think about political choices, and this is one of the most frustrating things for me when I talk to people about politics, and that is like, okay, you have a situation right now, whatever politics is happening right now. A lot of people are like, well, I don't like what's going on right now. And I'm not specifically talking about literally today, but if somebody's not happy with what's happening politically, they like to think, "Oh, we need to replace that person." And they think that you replace them with the perfect, with the utopia. So for example, you're like, "Okay, I don't like what the Republicans are doing right now. Therefore, I want to replace them with utopia and what should be what's perfect." But that's not our choices. Our choices are not between Republicans and utopia. Our choices are between Republicans, and in this case, Donald Trump, and Democrats. And like, it would have been in the last election, would have been Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. So it's always between the lesser of two evils, yeah, who we're choosing. And so, even though I might not be crazy about what Trump is doing with the Iran war, and although I'm hoping that things go well, it's still a choice between him and the Republicans and the Democrats. And to me, that's always a very easy decision to make. But I think, going to what your point is, and maybe your implied point, it's like there's a bunch of people out there who are like, well, I'm just not going to vote. And so you lose those people who went out and voted for you because you were promising not to go to war and not to get engaged in any, silly
Mhm.
international conflicts. And so I kind of, that's my concern, is that you're going to lose those people who don't care about the lesser of two evils. They're just like, you lied to me, and I'm not going to go out and vote for you.
No matter who I vote for, we're still going to war with Israel is like what people will say. You know what I mean? It's like that's what, it's like Democrat, Republican, we're always in the war in the Middle East, I'm not voting, But again, and this is just to reiterate my earlier point, it's like, but this is a Trump problem. He doesn't care about that. Like I really don't think he cares about the Republican Party after he leaves. I don't, I think you'd agree with this. He's not really like a conservative. We talked like, does he believe in pro-life stuff or whatever? No. Does he, like he's just Donald Trump, you know what I mean? And so I don't think he cares the situation he's leaving, Marco Rubio or JD Vance or whoever it may be. It's like he's like, I want to be remembered as, a great president, and I think that's a problem for the Republican Party and maybe something they should have had some foresight on when choosing him.
Well,
But anyway.
yeah, yeah, but I agree. Trump, he's thinking about his presidential library now. He wants to be known as a great president, and if being a great president means taking out the number one sponsor of terrorism, destroying the regime of the country who is the number one sponsor of terrorism. If that makes him great, but it hurts the Republican Party, I agree. He's not as concerned with the Republican Party per se. He's more
Hmm.
interested in how he'll be remembered. Okay, unless you
Yeah.
have anything else on that.
No, yeah, you that we spent a long time on that. While you change subjects, I'm gonna plug my phone in because it's getting low.
All right, you
See if
tell
I
me when you're
can
done there.
balance it. No, yeah, no,
Okay.
you can go.
Well, let's talk
Just
about there was the oral arguments were held in the Supreme Court yesterday, and it's regarding birthright citizenship. And this is the idea that anybody who is born in the United States automatically becomes a U.S. citizen. So if you step 5 feet within the U.S. border and you drop a baby, that baby's a U.S. citizen. If you come here on vacation and you drop a baby, you're an American citizen, or your baby's an American citizen. And really, what happened here is Trump said, "This is crazy. That doesn't make any sense." The 14th Amendment, which supposedly established birthright citizenship, was not written to allow people, children who were born here, to become U.S. citizens.
sorry.
It was something that was written around the time of after the Civil War. It was related to slavery, just to say, hey, the slaves who live here, they are US citizens. Has nothing to do with, again, somebody coming here illegally or on a visa, whether, if you're going to school or if you're on vacation, has nothing to do with those people. I tend to agree with that, or I agree with that 100%. And before we kind of talk about it, because I want to get your thoughts on, whether or not whether or not you agree with birthright citizenship, how you think the Supreme Court is going to rule. I want to talk a little bit about birth tourism. It's an industry, and it's
In
organized.
China, right?
What's that?
In China, right? I just heard about this.
Yeah, that's one of the places, but it's an organized business that helps pregnant women to travel to the US when they're, about to give birth. And and what they do, so you have companies that are based in Russia, China, South Korea, Nigeria, Brazil, Turkey, and there's probably other ones out there. But if you purchase this birth tourism, you're entitled to get coaching on visas, visas that'll get you here and keep you here for a while. They'll house you while you're going through your maternity, going through all that stuff. They'll make sure you get into a hospital. And there's an estimate of about, 25 to 35 babies are born annually that have gone through the birth tourism industry. And so, Cam, I'm not sure if you heard any of the oral arguments yesterday, but kind of just from your gut instinct or your informed instinct, whatever it might be, what are your thoughts on birthright citizenship? Should it be allowed? Should it be overturned?
Yeah, so I'm yeah, so it I would be interested to hear the argument that like, take out the legal because when you hear, like, if you hear a liberal argue this, they'll just argue, "Hey, like, it's right there." It's written very clearly, "You're born in America, you're a citizen," and it's like, okay, like, if you just take that out of it, I'd be interested to hear the argument that makes the idea of what you're describing, come to the United States, have a baby, it's a citizen. I'd be interested to hear how that someone try to make that not sound kind of silly. It obviously, on the face of it, is like, why would if I have a child in Brazil when I'm visiting, like, why would that child be Brazilian? Anyways, I think unless there's an argument I'm not thinking of, unquestionably, the idea of it and implementation of it is kind of ridiculous. Um, in terms of, like, the legality of it, it just seems as though and I've heard clips from the hearing, and it seems like, at least how a lot of the media that I've seen has portrayed it is like, Trump's appointed Supreme Court nominees are kind of like, yeah, like you don't really have a case here, Trump. At least that's the clips that are I'm hearing. It sounds like they are skeptical of the Trump argument of the legality of birthright citizenship. So I would be kind of surprised if it gets overturned because, again, from what I can tell, it just seems like relatively clear cut that it is the law. And so if that's what happens, you always kind of not triumph, but you always champion conservative judges for interpreting the law and just interpreting the law. These are the judges that you like, these conservative judges. So it's like if you're to tell me like, oh, four of the conservative judges ruled yes, I'd be like, okay, well, you know what, they're judges, we'll trust their opinion. If you But hey, this is still insane, like you're gonna have to go through the process of getting this change in a legal way. Does that sort of make sense? It's like
No.
obviously, the idea is crazy, but it seems as though, like, if I would accept if the Supreme Court's just like, "Yeah, it's crazy, but that's the law. Go change it," I'd be like, "All right, well, they know better than me," you know?
Yeah. I would say, and here's the big issue. In the 14th Amendment, there's a clause that says all persons born or naturalized in the US and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens. And that's the issue. What does it mean to be subject to the jurisdiction thereof? And I posted something on the Hands on Politics Facebook page today, which was something that Ketanji Brown Jackson said. And she essentially said, it's like if I go over to Japan and I rob somebody's pocketbook, I think she said, or if somebody robs my pocketbook, if I rob somebody's pocketbook, they can throw me in jail. Or if somebody robs my pocketbook, I can get them to arrest the person who did that. And she's like, that's what it means. That's what's subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And I'm like, that makes no sense because no matter what country you go to, you're subject to their laws, right? So,
Yeah.
but so I thought that was a ridiculous argument. But to me, and based on what I've heard the Trump administration argue, and what I've known from doing research previously, the being subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Yes, it means you have to obey the laws. Yes, it means you have to pay taxes. It means you have to attend jury duty, to vote. You have a military obligation. You have a loyalty to the United States. See, that's what makes it different. Like when you think of all the things, like if the government can send you to war, then you can be pretty sure you're subject to the jurisdiction thereof. If somebody comes here on vacation, if somebody just illegally crosses over the line, if somebody, goes to school here, they are not subject to, entering the military. They're not subject to um, you know, voting. They're not subject to, being on a jury. They're not subject to giving their total loyalty to that government. And so To me, it's just as clear as can be. But to your point about, yeah, well, but if the conservatives don't support this, if this conservatives on the Supreme Court don't support this, then I guess you're wrong. And I would say if the conservatives don't support this, I would be very disappointed. And basically, we're gonna have this. What did I call it? The birth tourism is going to be put on steroids after it, because everybody would love to have somebody in their family who is a U.S. citizen. And so I hope they don't rule it. And I know that there have been people who said, "Oh, it sounds like the conservatives on the Supreme Court aren't buying what the Republican, what the Solicitor General, I guess, is selling." But I don't know that that's true, because I believe in the past there's been people trying to anticipate what the Supreme Court was going to rule based on the oral arguments, and they've been wrong. And so I'm real hopeful that the Supreme Court is going to rule in a sensible, common sense way. And I'm not going to hold my breath. However, I'm really going to just stay optimistic that they're going to rule the right way, Cam.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I just, I don't. If they were to rule, the conservative judges were to rule in favor of birthright citizenship, I mean, it's like, I mean, how they'd be going directly against, Trump. Like they have every reason to go against it. So, in my opinion, if they're like, "Hey, like you don't really have a case here," it's
Why
like,
do you think
you
they
know,
would? They have every reason to go against it. Why do you say that?
or they have every because I mean, because the conservative position is anti that, that's what I like. If you were to attribute a bias to that, like to them, it would be a bias against birthright citizenship. Does that make sense? So it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's not like we're talking, whatever liberal judges, if they're gonna vote for it, and you're like, okay, like no shock there,
yeah.
But if the conservative judges do, it's like, okay, like they, if anything, they have a motivation to vote against it. But they've all, experts, Trump appointed them. Like if they come to the conclusion that there's no good argument, in my opinion, it's like, okay, well, what did you want them to do? Like, just go against what they thought? Because yeah, I know you're not saying that, but you're just hoping they do,
I
do
hope
what
they
you think's
do
right. But
what I think is the right thing. Now, I will
yeah.
say this, I think John Roberts doesn't always rule based on the Constitution, based on precedents. Sometimes, like the, ACA, the Obamacare, he ruled in a way because he wanted for whatever reason, he wanted that to pass, and I think part of it is he doesn't well, I forget that, I don't wanna take too long to get into that, but I think there's an incentive for somebody like John Roberts to say, if we overturn this, it's overturning something that we understood to be the law for whatever, 130 years, give or take. And he might rule against turning over birthright citizenship because he doesn't want to create um, such a political hot potato, if you know what I mean. But I would be surprised if Gorsuch, Alito, um, who was Thomas, Comey Barrett, and whatever the last one's name is. I don't know if I said Gorsuch, but anyway, I'd be surprised if the other Kavanaugh. I'd be surprised if the other five don't vote the right way. Again, I'm not holding my breath, but that's what I'm hoping. Hey, unless you have something more, I know you wanted to wrap it up a little bit before the time we were wrapping
Mhm.
it up here. Do you want
We
to?
can do one more segment. One
Okay,
more
one
segment.
more segment. Okay, let's talk about the Save America Act, which is I'll just give a quick rundown. It's the whole idea that photo ID is going to be needed for federal elections. So you're going to have to prove that you're a US citizen in order to register. So, yeah, so there's really three things. You're going to need photo ID. You're going to have to prove that you're a US citizen, and states are going to have to make sure they're keeping their voter rolls clean, which means they have to make sure they're taking off dead people. They got to make sure we don't have duplicates. They got to make sure we don't have illegal aliens on there. And if anybody's moved from one locality to another, like moved from New York to Georgia, they have to take the people off the New York rolls. So I think, in my opinion, this is such a common sense issue that I can't believe anybody would have a legitimate argument against it. So I'm setting it up that way to kind of get your thoughts on the SAVE Act. What do you think?
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's obvious why it's obvious why Democrats would fight against this one. Um, Even though I don't necessarily think their concerns will be valid, because obviously this, as the arguments, oh, minority voters, poor voters who tend to vote Democrat, they don't have a passport. It costs 100 something bucks. They don't have, they don't have a birth certificate at higher rates than people who vote Republican. So it makes all the sense in the world to me for them to fight against this. Just like if the Democrats were putting forth like,
Wait,
hey,
are you
like you're
saying
gonna
you think those are legitimate concerns? You think
no, 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 I'm just
yeah,
saying it makes all the sense in the world, like, from their perspective, like, you know, to vote against it because it's gonna hurt their voter base in the short term, theoretically, right? Um,
I don't agree with that
you don't agree?
theoretical.
Yeah.
It
Well,
doesn't
yeah.
hurt their legitimate voter base any more than it hurts the Republican voter base. I don't think.
But so you don't they throw out see, the stats are thrown out, and that makes sense to me that minority voters and, we'll just say Democratic voters are less likely to have a passport, birth certificate.
I would
Do
agree
you
with
disagree with that
the
or
passport. I agree with the
yeah.
passport, but why does anybody think that they don't have access to a or they don't have access to their birth certificate at a higher rate than rural voters do?
Yeah.
Why don't they have why are they worse off than a rural
Yeah.
voter?
Well, yeah, I don't know why they would be. I just know, like, I just see the headlines and the news flashes of, and I hear the argument. There's somebody in the Senate or House that I heard Democrat make the argument recently, and oh, whatever it is, minority voters or 75%, whatever the numbers are. I don't know why they would be. I'm just saying, based on the stats that I hear, it seems as though they are. You know what I mean? And for whatever reason, and you're saying you just don't buy that you don't buy that Democrat voters have less of access to
No.
a birth certificate?
No, I would argue Democratic voters probably okay, let's just stipulate that many people can't remember where they put their birth certificate. I've
Mhm,
had to order my birth certificate twice in my lifetime because I couldn't find the previous one.
mhm,
I did it, and any Democratic voter could do exactly what I did, and it's probably easier if you're in an urban location because there's going to be some kind of a it doesn't even matter if you're near the county, the place where you get your birth certificate, because right now you can do it online, and
mhm.
um, so for people who do not have their birth certificate, you go online, you order it. Maybe it costs you a couple bucks. I don't know. I would be 100% fine if this bill said, if you don't have a birth certificate, we are going to set up a free website where you can get your birth certificate. um,
Yeah,
I would be fine if they said, we are going to implement this in 2028. And so you need to start, uh, getting your act together to order your birth certificate now. Here's the
yeah.
thing. Um, like there's a family member who complained, a family member
Of
who
ours?
complained, what's that?
Of ours? Family member of ours?
Yes, yes. Let me see.
Was it Aunt Chris?
Um, I'm reading this and I'm trying to no, I can't find it right now. But she was her point was women are not going to be able to vote, and why is
Mhm.
that? Because you need a birth certificate. And many women change their names. And so when they go in to register, it's going to be, no, your Sherry Collins is your birth certificate, but your full name is Sherry Collins Hand. Oh, we can't. So, in the worst case scenario, I guess your mother, my wife, would have to show a marriage certificate.
Right.
Is that a little inconvenient? Yes, it's maybe a little bit inconvenient. It was inconvenient when we had to get our passport and I had to go someplace to a county and get that. And I had to make sure I had my birth certificate and whatever else I needed. Yes, it's inconvenient, but what is happening now? If it's so inconvenient to prove that you're a U.S. citizen before you're voting? How many non-citizens are voting right now? On the one hand, Democrats like to talk about, oh, there's no proof of any non-citizens voting, but at the same time, they're telling us that nobody had to prove that they're a U.S. citizen to register to vote. So how in the world do we know that we don't have illegal aliens voting? That's number one. How do we know that they're not already voting? And number two, isn't a little bit of inconvenience worthwhile if you can make sure that we don't have illegal aliens voting?
Hmm.
And the truth is, yes. And finally, I'll say this is why Democrats don't want it. It has nothing to do with claiming that, minority voters or Democrat voters can't get access to their birth certificate and all that, and they can't afford it. It has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with the fact that they don't want people to have to prove they're U.S. citizens in order to vote because Democrats have non-citizens voting. And that's all I'll say about that.
That was a good rant. Yeah, I would just say I would just say let's just let's just give a Democrat the benefit of the doubt, because if a Democrat listens to this, they're going to say no. Like, look at the stats.
They'll say, no, black people and Hispanic people are too dumb to find their birth
Yeah,
certificate, and
yeah,
white
yeah.
people are smart. And so it's going to give white people an advantage, which is so
Right.
incredibly racist.
Sure. Yeah. No, definitely racist. I'm just saying, I don't even think like at the end of the day, if this goes through, like this is why I would say to a Democrat that would be like, well, you know, it's going to hurt the Democrat voter, but Republicans want to do this because they don't want minorities to be able to vote. I'd be like, well, look, guys, you think if this goes into effect that the Democratic Party and all their donors aren't going to do everything in the world to ensure that black voters or urban voters have the easiest possible path ever to get their birth certificate so they can register to vote. It's like like they're going to have vans, just like we've talked about with the vote. Like the Democrats have an amazing, a great um get out the vote I don't know, apparatus is the right word, but
Yeah,
it's like
that's right.
like it wouldn't happen immediately. Even if it did, maybe let's just again, if you're taking their arguments, maybe it hurts you in this next election. Again, it's not going to matter because a Republican's not going to win because gas prices are $8 and we're in the middle of a war. But at the end of the day, like I think the Democratic Party will figure it out how to make sure all these people who supposedly don't have access to their birth certificate get access. And another point that was made, that I heard made by a friend of mine was like, it's also not really like a rich or poor thing necessarily. It's like it's not an advantage. Like getting your birth certificate, you're not really at an advantage being rich. You know what I'm saying? You're not. It's not something you can pay somebody else to do for you. You know what I mean? It's like you as a rich person, at least as I understand it, are just as able as a poor person to get your birth certificate. So it's not, it just doesn't really line up. But I think unlike you, I can see why somebody might be like, hey, this is gonna deter women from voting who are married. Like I can see that because like you admitted, it will be a a hassle, but I think
No, not a
I
hassle.
it's gonna be an
It's an
inconvenience.
inconvenience,
Yeah.
but it's no different than going to going to the DMV, going to get your cars get put tires on your car, going to your child's I don't know, baseball game. Maybe that's not a good example. There's a million things that we do that don't fit into our schedule perfectly. But I'll tell you what, making sure that US citizens are the only ones to vote, if anything is worth a little bit of inconvenience, it's that.
Yeah, and then you get into and that's like then we can get into we shouldn't get into this right now, but it's like if somebody, if I'm playing devil's advocate and somebody comes in and is like, "Well, Ken, there are no instances of this happening, like it's impossible for an illegal alien to vote, and so you're just creating barriers for women and minorities for no good reason." Then you'd be able to come back, well, we don't know if that's, if truly illegal aliens are voting. Also, I can show you these, instances of it, blah, blah, blah. So if I was to feel convinced that it is happening or that it's a real threat, which I am, I think what you said resonates well. Is like, okay, how do we really know it's not happening?
Yeah.
That resonates. So yeah, that I'm kind of rambling here, but it's like if somebody were to 100% prove to me that it hasn't happened, it's never going to happen, I'd be like, okay, let's scrap this whole thing. But I don't think they could. I don't think you could prove. It's just like it's probably happened. It's probably going to happen. So why not, put this extra layer of inconvenience up for people to ensure the elections are all good to go. So
All
yeah,
right. Well, here I want to say a couple things. You weren't rambling. You are the voice of reason. I tend to be the one who gets a lot more emotional, a lot more passionate about some of this stuff. Um, but having said that, we're not going to have a chance to talk about Christy Nome and Pam Bondi, and we won't be able to get to
good
some of these.
riddance.
Yeah. Well, so
I know you like them too, but
I, you know, I'm not saying that there's nobody better out there. I did not like how people were criticizing them. I didn't like how they were going after these two conservative women because both of them, I'm sure, have had um, plastic surgery to a certain extent. And it really bothers me how these liberals who are all about women's power and and then they criticize women, Republican women, for their looks. They're such hypocrites. If they want to criticize Christy Nome and Bondi for their politics, totally okay with that. But on Facebook, I get a lot of liberal sites, and they are the way they tear apart conservative women and their looks is just appalling to me. So, yeah, I'm not, listen, I'm not against them leaving because one of the things I'd say, and I don't want to spend much time on this at all, is if you work in Trump's administration, you are without a doubt going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And you can't keep up that pace without you just can't keep up that pace. And so replacing somebody, even if, even if it's not related to concerns about their job, I fully understand it because Trump is working these people to death. And so I would rather just say thank you for your service. You've done a lot of good things. You're not perfect. I'm sorry that you have a husband who apparently likes to dress up in women's clothes. Whatever
tough
Christy
luck.
Nome. But
Yeah.
I do like them. I'm not really disappointed that they're being replaced, but I don't like how liberals criticize conservative women. They're just really, really
So,
nasty.
real quick, because when you say that, I feel like I've seen a certain elderly purple-haired congresswoman laughed at a number of times on the hands on politics page. So do you like? Because
No, no, that I'm glad you brought
I
that up.
would yeah.
No, I'm glad you brought that up because another family member criticized me when I posted something that had a picture of two women. One was
Mhm.
Christy Nome and one was DeLorean, I think her name is, whatever. The
The
purple
purple.
haired woman. And the question was, which one is the conservative? Which one is the liberal? And here's the thing, I was criticized for making fun of her looks. That was not about making fun of her looks. What that was about is you can tell the liberal she the reason she has her purple hair and her funny looking glasses is for her to tell people I'm one of you. All these people who protest ICE, all these people who go on these silly, partial birth abortion, marches, who wear the pink hats, all these crazy looking weird with the things through their nose and she's saying I'm one of you. So I'm criticizing, if I was criticizing her at all, it was criticizing her for being a part of that lunatic group, not about her looks. Her looks represent something that is radically liberal. And so that's all that was about. So I don't criticize women. Like if I wanted to criticize women, I'd criticize Hillary Clinton, but I don't criticize her for her looks. And there's many other, you've never heard me criticize Rosie O'Donnell about her looks. I'm always critical about their politics, not about their looks. I'm glad you
Yeah,
gave
and
me a
it's
chance to
to
clarify.
clear that up. Yeah. No, yeah, and it's an easy I mean, I personally think the double standard goes both ways generally, but it is a glaring double standard of the, don't make fun of people's looks. Oh, we'll make fun of Christine Ohm's looks. Oh, don't make fun of trans people. Oh, we'll make fun of, Christine Ohm's husband for doing weird stuff. It's like it is a glaring inconsistency or
Hypocrisy.
what. Yeah, I think it goes both ways, probably more than you do, but um nevertheless, yeah,
All right.
nevertheless.
All right. Well, listen, Cam, I have to say, I really enjoy doing the show with you. I love doing the show with my brother, Richie, but I also just love talking about politics with you, especially in this, it's kind of a formal, more organized format here. And same goes with talking with Kelsey, and hopefully we'll get Kelsey on in the future. But as always, I'm very proud of you, and I'm very proud. I like to believe that I am a balanced person. I listen to both sides, but I know that the way I present it maybe doesn't come out that way a lot of times. But you, for sure, come across as a very level-headed person, very reasonable person, and I enjoy hearing your perspective and your point of view, not only on politics but also on sports. Even
Mm.
though I don't agree with you when it comes to uh, um,
Dyson Daniels. Dyson
Dyson
Daniels.
Daniels taking 3 pointers. That's the one thing I think we disagree with on there. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and you didn't seem so proud of me earlier when I told you I was afraid to get my blood taken. So it's good to hear.
Well, listen, we are all concerned. Not nobody likes getting needles, but you're going to have to man up and just get some blood taken. It's really not that
Yeah.
bad.
Mm.
Um, but you know
Anyway.
what? You come from a long list of wimpy people. You have Grandpa Hand. He was wimpy when it came to needles. You have your Uncle Richie. I don't think he's really crazy about needles. Maybe I'm wrong there. I'm
He's
not
giving
crazy
blood,
about
but yeah.
needles, but so I think it's in the genes, and so I can't be too critical of you. Anyway, I want to give you. You have anything else to say before I wrap it up here?
Nope, got nothing else for you, so I will, head out. I gotta
Nope. Don't go
have some
anywhere yet.
dinner.
You stay on as I lead us out.
Okay.
Okay, Cam. So this to everybody else, thank you for watching another episode of Hands on Politics. We post each episode to our Hands on Politics Facebook site and on X. Plus, we put it on YouTube at Hands on Politics with Rich and Ken. And finally, if you want to comment on the show, you can email us at hop2025@aol.com. We'll see everybody next week. And Cameron, I will see you later on. When am I going to see you? Is it next week I'm going to see you?
Not this weekend, but the next weekend.
Next weekend. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, Cam. So anyway, thanks for being on, and I will talk to you later, and I'll see you next week.
Alright, thank you.